and popular figures came crashing down.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to make a public statement and won't be taking any questions.
When the state's corruption body announced it was examining Gladys Berejiklian's conduct over several years.
It pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier.
To understand today's bombshell announcement, we need to go back to October last year.
There's a sensational story breaking out of the ICAC inquiry.
Please be seated, Ms Berejiklian.
The Premier made a surprise appearance at ICAC, making a public revelation about a very personal matter.
Ms Berejiklian, have you ever been in a close personal relationship with Mr Maguire?
Yeah, I would like to say at the outset that Mr Maguire was a colleague of 15 years. He was someone that I trusted, and that developed into a close personal relationship. Yeah.
Were you in love with her, or were you just with her for the power?
Will you apologise to the public?
Gladys Berejiklian downplayed the significance of that relationship.
Does the Premier deserve to lose her job?
I didn't feel the relationship had sufficient substance for it to be made public.
What did Gladys Berejiklian know about your business dealings?
ICAC has been investigating whether Darryl Maguire misused his position in public office for his own financial gain. Gladys Berejiklian's revelation about their relationship raised questions about whether the Premier had ever made decisions that could benefit him politically, or if she had an undeclared conflict of interest.
You've got yourself in a terrible mess, mixing up your public duty with your private relationship that you kept secret for many, many years.
I've tried to be as open as possible, answer all the questions as fully as possible.
Last December, 7:30 revealed the Premier's role in the process of approving a grant for this development, the headquarters of the Australian Clay Target Association, when Darryl Maguire was the local member.
Here you have a somewhat smallish association in Wagga. Clearly they want to get ahead. They're very friendly with Mr Maguire. He's got influence. He backs their proposal to build a new clubhouse.
The Premier has said there was nothing unusual about how this $5.5 million grant was awarded.
I understand all those arrangements went through the normal processes. I don't intervene in those processes.
The normal process is for you as Treasurer to sign off on it.
Well, I'm telling you now that as Treasurer, you oversee all funds that are obviously going through, but that is up to the relevant minister, and I wasn't the relevant minister.
You made decisions that would benefit your boyfriend.
Wrong.
That's the truth, isn't it?
But these documents obtained by 7:30 revealed Darryl Maguire wrote to then Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian in January 2016, asking for financial support. She responded personally a month later, thanking Darryl Maguire for bringing the project to the government's attention. Before the Clay Target Association had even lodged a formal application, its funding was set aside in December 2016. As Treasurer, Gladys Berejiklian would ordinarily have chaired the committee making these funding decisions. A year later, she moved into the state's top job.
I think as night follows day, the Premier would have been obliged not to sit on this decision. Now, whether she did or not, I don't know. But if she did, I think that would be a clear conflict of interest.
Initially, the state government wasn't persuaded by the Clay Target Association's proposal. An internal government assessment questioned whether the plan to create a convention centre would attract significant numbers of international and interstate visitors as promised. After the development failed a cost-benefit analysis, a letter between two senior public servants reveals a request by the Premier to take another look at the project. As the grant neared final approval, another senior bureaucrat updated one of Gladys Berejiklian's staffers. Just wanted you in the loop, the staffer writes, given the Premier's interest in the Clay Target grant.
What we see from these documents is not only was the Premier advised right at the outset, she was kept in the loop and intimately involved throughout the entire process. And that's very much contrary to the Premier's public narrative.
Over the past 10 months, 7:30 has been documenting how this relatively obscure grant was funded. We've asked the Premier about her role, and she said that there was nothing unusual about the process. But today, the Independent Commission Against Corruption announced that it believes the Premier does have questions to answer. It's investigating the Premier's role in awarding the grant and whether that amounted to a breach of public trust.
Morning, Premier. How are you feeling?
Have I stuffed up in my personal life? Absolutely. Am I devastated by what's happened? Absolutely. Am I embarrassed? And do I accept that people will cast judgment? Of course.
The corruption watchdog will hold a public hearing on 18 October, where it's likely Gladys Berejiklian will be summoned to explain her actions.
I've always acted with the highest level of integrity. History will demonstrate that I've always executed my duties, again, with the highest level of integrity for the benefit of the people of New South Wales, who I have had the privilege to serve.
Some Australians will be able to go overseas within weeks with the federal government to lift an 18-month ban on international travel. But overseas flights can only resume once a state or territory reaches a double-dose vaccination rate of 80%. And as political editor Andrew Probyn explains, the travel industry is ready to launch a legal challenge against states that resist opening up.
For the travel sector, the outside world is their business. Australia's international borders been slammed shut since March last year. Domestic borders often closed too.
It's been tough, it's been long and it's been devastating.
But with vaccination rates soaring in some states, borders will soon begin to reopen.
And that is giving us the opportunity to get Australia ready for takeoff.
The federal government to allow international travel from jurisdictions that reach 80% double vaccination. That's less than 3 weeks away for New South Wales and the ACT. But there's a catch.
Vaccinated Australians will be able to travel. At this point, we are not saying unvaccinated Australians can travel.
Scott Morrison promised that Australians who were stranded overseas would be home by last Christmas. Now he's promising they'll be home by this Christmas.
If pilot programs are successful, vaccinated Australians arriving home will be subject to 7 days home quarantine, not 14.
We believe over time that needs to get shorter and eventually back to the way it was pre-COVID.
The list of recognised vaccines for returning Australians expanded to include China's Sinovac and India's Covishield jab.
We want the place open as quickly as possible.
States that resist reopening their domestic borders, even with high vaccination rates, to face a possible legal challenge from Flight Centre and other tourism businesses.
It does look at the moment that you could easily go to Paris or London or New York, but you won't be able to travel to Perth.
For the Prime Minister, it's not so much whether he goes to Perth in the weeks ahead, but whether he goes to Glasgow for global climate talks, where he'd undoubtedly face demands for Australia to do more. Scott Morrison is citing the prospect of his 4th 2-week home quarantine since June as one reason not to attend.
That's a long time for a Prime Minister to be in quarantine in a 6-month period.
Especially one who'll face voters in the not-too-distant future. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The Prime Minister has promoted several of his close allies in a mini reshuffle sparked by the resignation of Christian Porter. Mr Porter stepped down after declaring a blind trust paid for part of his legal fees for defamation action against the ABC. Immigration Minister Alex Hawke has been promoted to Cabinet despite taking on no additional responsibilities, while Energy Minister Angus Taylor will take on Mr Porter's industry portfolio.
These changes provide a timely opportunity to reinforce some of the key issues the government is progressing, especially following on from the successful series of meetings that we recently held in Washington.
Defence Industry Minister Melissa Price will add sites to her portfolios, while Ben Morton and Tim Wilson have also been promoted to the Ministry and Outer Ministry. Hundreds of thousands of Victoria's authorised workers have been given a 2-week deadline to get at least 1 dose of a COVID vaccine if they want to continue working on site. The state government says all authorised workers must be double dosed by the 26th of November. The change comes after community infections surged this week with 1,143 new cases reported today. Construction sites will also be allowed to reopen on Tuesday with up to 25% capacity if workers have had 1 jab. The Premier Daniel Andrews says vaccines will help protect the community and reduce the pressure on the healthcare system.
This is critically important to keep the case numbers down so that we can open up on the 26th of October, get our freedom back, get the economy going again and deliver the national plan. This is picking up all of those who are not specifically the subject of a vaccine mandate and making sure that they play their part in stopping the spread of this virus, seeing less patients in hospital than would otherwise be the case, and protecting that roadmap to reopening for all of us.
Construction sites in Victoria will reopen in 4 days' time after the government and industry thrashed out a new set of rules. The reopening plan has been applauded by employers and unions.
For some workers, the only tough vaccine choice is which arm.
You want that one? Can you hold them down there?
Yes. Industry is taking shots to workers and the vast majority are willing.
We've got to get the rates up. We've got to see if we can get rid of this disease.
The sector does face some loud resistance to mandatory jabs and COVID rules. But the government isn't budging.
We want to see a new approach, a reset and a restart.
From Tuesday, construction sites can return at 25% capacity if all workers have had one shot. If all workers on larger sites have been double dosed, it can operate at 50% and crib rooms can open if...
Issues of enhanced cleaning, density requirements within the crib facility, and also the installation of additional ventilation to move the air through the crib rooms.
Businesses are ready to support their workers, they're ready to work within the government's compliance framework, and it's a condition of our reopening.
Unions are also supportive.
A group of morons may have managed to shut down construction, but the members of the building unions are the ones who got it open safely.
Next week, smaller builders like Top Constructions will be able to operate with 5 workers on site. It will mean slower work.
We consider ourselves really fortunate to be able to have worked throughout most of the pandemic. You know, when a lot of other industries have been doing it really tough. So whilst it's not ideal and it's a bit inconvenient, we're just happy to get back into it.
Getting construction back on the tools is important for the government, workers and the economy. It'll be up to employers to check the vaccination status of workers and to keep records. Authorised officers will be conducting audits and there'll be fines of tens of thousands of dollars for those that don't comply.
There is a zero tolerance approach to non-compliance.
Our industry is very heavily regulated and we're very used to abiding by these regulations.
As workers pick up their tools on Tuesday, students will pick up their pens for the GAT. Teens in 22 high-risk postcodes across Melbourne have been told to get a COVID test ahead of the exam. Richard Willingham, ABC News, Melbourne.
New South Wales has endured its equal deadliest day of the pandemic with 15 fatalities, including a woman in her 50s who tested positive to the virus after she died. It brings the total number of deaths since the Delta outbreak began in Sydney to 352. 864 new local cases have been recorded today. 64% of people aged over 16 are now fully vaccinated. Non-urgent day surgery will recommence at private facilities in Greater Sydney from next week. Overseas now, and climate activists from around the world have been gathering in Italy for the Youth for Climate event as environment ministers meet ahead of the Glasgow summit next month. Thousands of people are marching through the streets of Milan, while the city's iconic business square has been turned into an open-air tented camp. The protesters, led by Greta Thunberg, are demanding lawmakers match their ideas with action and billions of dollars in funding to wean the world off fossil fuels to cleaner energy. A former police officer who kidnapped, raped and murdered Sarah Everard in London will die in jail. Speaking after his sentence, the UK's top police officer described the man's crimes as cowardly, shameful and a betrayal of everything police stand for. The case has also sparked a fresh review into policing, with allegations misconduct isn't being properly investigated. Europe correspondent Isabella Higgins reports from London.
Sarah Everard was known to her loved ones for being caring, funny and kind. They never expected her life would be cut short simply by walking home. CCTV captured the 33-year-old's final movements, buying a bottle of wine to take to a friend's place in South London. Then a passing bus caught the chilling moment she stopped by the man who would end it all. Arm out, He flashes his police ID, staging a fake arrest to get her in his car.
His actions were a gross betrayal of everything policing stands for.
Sarah was driven to a remote block where Wayne Couzens raped and strangled her. His premeditated plot led police to close in on one of their own.
Do you know where Sarah is? No. Right.
In his sentencing, the judge said Couzens had abused his power and was hunting a lone female, showing no evidence of genuine contrition.
I recognise that for some people a precious bond of trust has been damaged.
The shocking crime led to a national mourning and shone a light on the violence experienced by women across Britain. And now further revelations that the Met Police didn't investigate 2 previous allegations of indecent exposure against Couzens.
All of us want to feel safe and be safe. That is absolutely a right that we have, and with that, of course, the police need to engage in the right way and they'll be held to account.
This case led the government to conduct a major review of policing and crimes against women, but there's frustration that months on little action has been taken and more women have died.
Just weeks ago, 28-year-old teacher Sabina Nessa was murdered in a suspected random attack just metres from her home. Women are asking how many more lives will be lost while they wait for change. Isabella Higgins, ABC News, London.
Returning home, yesterday's tornado in regional New South Wales came as just as much of a shock to the Weather Bureau as it did to locals. 3 people were injured and at least 11 properties were badly damaged when the storm struck near Bathurst. Today, those owners came home to start picking up the pieces.
Scott McKinnon is still processing the scariest 30 seconds of his life.
This was the kitchen here. I was standing just here. You see a bit of the blood just there. This where I was hanging on just like that.
As the tornado tore through his home, he was lifted off his kitchen floor.
Bang! Flipped my legs up like that and slammed me down on the sink here. Looked up there and seen all the bloody cows and trees and our shed and house and everything just going away in the wind.
Incredibly, Scott escaped with only cuts to one arm. His dog Pom Pom is being treated for more serious injuries.
Travelled 300 metres in the air and we're still alive on the upside of the fence down the bottom there.
It's still sinking in for his neighbour Julia Salon too.
I can't explain, I've never seen anything like this. The truck has obviously been lifted up and it's thrown across, which weighs a tonne. The trampoline, we haven't been able to find the trampoline.
The tornado destroyed one of the 2 houses on her property. It's impossible to say what the rest of storm season has in store. Tornadoes are notoriously difficult to predict. The Weather Bureau had been warning about yesterday's system, but no one could predict just how bad it would be. Now the storm clouds have passed, Scott's planning his next move.
We'll have to probably just bulldoze him up and might build a brick house now instead of a wooden one.
Spirits high despite quite the shake-up. Molly Gorman, ABC News, Meadow Flat.